Hi everyone! Today I want to talk about a critical issue that often goes unnoticed: the systemic challenge of mental health misdiagnosis, particularly affecting women. Imagine walking into a therapist's office, hoping to find understanding and support, only to be misdiagnosed. Your experiences minimized, your struggles misinterpreted. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario, it's a reality for countless women across the United States. In 2023, women accounted for 26.4% of diagnosed Americans living with mental illness. This is a 7% higher diagnosis rate when compared to men of the same group. Even though women account for more of the share of diagnosed mental illness, the misdiagnosis rates for women are much higher, anywhere from 30 to 50% for prevalent disorders like depression and anxiety. Misdiagnosis is a complex issue. It's deeply rooted in the intersectional identities that everybody carries. Different aspects of somebody's identity can create unique challenges for diagnosis. Some of the factors of identity that can increase the risk for misdiagnosis in women include her race and ethnicity, her sexual orientation, her disability, and her age, and a combination of all of these and more. Having multiple marginalized identities can further increase the probability of misdiagnosis. These identities compound, and they create unique challenges depending on the types of identities that are intersecting. So for instance, if you have a Latin American woman who's disabled, physically disabled, and she's, say, above the age of 40, she's going to face much more unique challenges to her situation than another woman of a different ethnicity, of a different ability status, and of a different age. Coupled with these identities are the intersecting biases that counselors hold. Those create significant challenges when diagnosing. Each counselor has their own implicit bias, whether or not they are aware of it, and depending on the intersections of a client's identity, either one of their identities can be overstated or understated or misinterpreted as far as the client is aware of, and this can further lead to misdiagnosis. This can be extremely challenging in the case of marginalized identities because usually when a marginalized client finally goes to see a counselor, there are significant amounts of resources that need to be expended on their part in order to even receive counseling in the first place, whether it be socioeconomic status or just the stigmatization faced by even receiving mental health care. And if they're met with a counselor who is not aware of their identities and their intersections and not aware of the role that the counselor has within their relationship, it can be very challenging, and it can also, when somebody is misdiagnosed, it can even exacerbate a lot of those issues. So, within misdiagnosis, a huge component of this is the therapeutic relationship. That is the trust, rapport, and non-judgmental atmosphere that a counselor builds with their client. This is integral to diagnosis and also developing a treatment plan for a client. This therapeutic relationship is really at the heart of what counselors do and a lot of their effectiveness as far as different interventions can go. And it's even more important when thinking about misdiagnosis. Some of the challenges that can occur within a therapeutic relationship are the inherent power imbalance that favors the counselor. So when you take into account marginalized identities, it becomes even more apparent, and it becomes something that the counselor becomes responsible for. In clients with marginalized identities, the counselor's implicit biases significantly impact their diagnosis. A thought, behavior, or even emotion, to some extent, can be misconstrued on any basis that the counselor's biases choose, whether it be something cultural, like the culturally bound syndromes that I know we've discussed in class, or whether it be an expression of emotion, or even relationships that they have with their family. If a counselor is not aware of the specific identities and that a client has and how they come into play within their life, misdiagnosis can definitely occur. One of the biggest challenges within the therapeutic relationship is the limited client agency in the diagnostic process. It's essentially the idea that clients don't really get the say in what their final diagnosis is going to be, and depending on the information or what they're willing to share with their counselor, that a correct diagnosis can be made or not made based on the information that the client is giving the counselor. Not only is that miscommunication difficult for the counselor when developing a treatment plan, but it's difficult for the client, because if they're not sharing things that could be important to them or even important to the counselor, misdiagnosis is definitely something that happens within that process. So what happens after somebody is misdiagnosed? Some of the personal consequences include questioning their self-identity. So they might be wondering if they even have the diagnosis, if the self-stigmatization or other ideas that they've heard about their specific diagnosis, if it even fits them, if it is relevant, if the treatment could be relevant. In relation to this, it could lead to worsening mental health symptoms if they receive a diagnosis and treatment that's not necessarily fitting for them or what they would find most helpful. And it can even have the consequences of potentially discontinuing treatment. So somebody receives a diagnosis that they're not happy with, that they completely disagree with. This could lead to them terminating the therapeutic relationship. It could lead to them not continuing to seek therapy from any other counselor in the future. It could also lead to them potentially self-stigmatizing even more than they already have when it comes to an improper diagnosis. Moving beyond personal consequences, some of the broader societal effects of misdiagnosis are the economic implications. Usually what happens after somebody is misdiagnosed is it can lead to this self-doubt, it can lead to the personal consequences, and then it will eventually have radiating effects within their personal life. A lot of the time they end up either going on leave, with the 69% of mental health leaves of absence were taken by women in the workforce in 2024, so recently. But it leads to them not working, either completely quitting their jobs or taking extended leaves of absences because they're not met with the proper care that they need. Misdiagnosis also has the impact of reinforcing systemic inequities. This is for women, this is for marginalized groups, this is for women who belong to marginalized groups. Being unable to receive the proper treatment and the proper diagnosis for a mental health issue is something that radiates to every layer of society. Misdiagnosis perpetuates systemic challenges that are already faced by women and other marginalized groups. Inadequate treatment plans, reduced workplace productivity, diminished personal and professional responsibilities and opportunities, and the reinforcement of existing power structures within society. What can counselors do about this? Primarily, recognizing and challenging their own implicit biases, being aware of them, understanding counselor and client power dynamics, what that means not just for people who are of your same origin, your same ethnicity, your same gender, age, all of those, but others, and what those power dynamics look like for other groups. Counselors should be able to approach diagnosis with empathy, understanding the potential impact of a diagnosis on an individual. There are many potential consequences to receiving both proper and improper diagnoses. Understanding the severity, or not severity, but just seriousness of a diagnosis, not just for insurance, not just for yourself in terms of treatment plans and everything else, but what it would mean for a client to hear that you have diagnosed them with something specific. Being able to talk about it with them, I think that's most important. And above all, to consider clients' intersecting identities when you give them a diagnosis, making sure that it's something that actually fits the individual and not something that can be attributed to them based on an external expression of one of their identities. Addressing the impacts of misdiagnosis, we can understand that misdiagnosis is a critical systemic issue. It's something that is built into the structure of how the medical model of counseling exists right now, and that women with multiple marginalized identities are the most affected by this. Individual and societal change requires active awareness for both the counselor and the client. It is a partnership. It's not necessarily the counselor doing one thing or the client only doing another thing. Yes, those are the most important things. And here are my citations. Thank you.